Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Marion Franklin Acton, Frank Paul Addis, Paul James Allen, Johnny Lee Anderson, James Leonard Armstrong, Gary Wayne Arnold, Keith Noel Atchley, Richard Atwood, Richard David Osbrooks, Wayne Carlos Baggett, William John Bannon, Jr., Clarence Edward Barnes, Lori Eugene Barnes, Beverly Lee Barnhart, Craig Nicholas Berry, Jack Perry Begley, Jr., Robert Winslow Belcher, Howell Frank Blakely, Howard Kelvin Blevins, Wayne Alden Blomstrom, Donald Charles Bosbury, Barry Bernard Broerman, Merle Dwayne Brown, Kenneth Earl Brown, Richard Francis Bubala, Carl Dwayne Buckley, William Carl Buick, Kenneth Maurice Burnett, Andrew J. Campbell, Daniel Charles Case, William Harvey Cossey, John Clifford Chavez, Leonard George Chesley, Jr., Robert M. Christian, Jr., Jerry Douglas Clark, Michael Dwayne Klickner, Bobby Walter Coleman, Ralph Coleman, Zed Connor Creveling, Harlan Eugene Daniels, Dennis Robert Davidson, John Allen Davis, Emilio A. de la Garza, Jr., Michael Gregory DeMarco, Thaddeus Dennis, Donald Eugene Dermont, Jr., Dennis A. Desco, Perry Dickon, Jr., James Arthur Dill, Edward Joseph Downey, Jr., John Henry Eaglin, Edward Valentine Iden, Jr., Edwin Ellis Elliott, Richard Eugene Irwin, Neil Philip Farmer, Philya Fee, Charles Richard Finley, Delwyn Allen Fitch, Guy Talmadge Fletcher, Jr., Jose Maria Flores, Clarence Richard Franklin, Lawrence Lee Fullaway, Emmons Edward Funk, Jr., Eugene Richard Gannon,
Alonzo Garrett, Eugene Garrett, Jr., Edward Lee George, Wozie Gerald, Grant Madison Gilbreth, Valentine Barima Gomez, Jr., Frederick Dunham Grayton, Donald Wilford Hall, David A. Hammett, Charles Edward Harvey, Larry Davis Hatcher, Dale Harry Haver, Norman Laverne Hawkins, John Harrison Hawley, Gerald M. Hellman, Jr., Bruce Dale Henderson, Timothy Henderson, Odalise Hernandez Pena, Jimmy Ray Higdon, Richard Lee Higginbotham, John Andrew Hoggett, John Parker Holden II, Edward Emmanuel Howard, Richard Elliott Huff, Jean-Pierre Humbert, Kenneth Earl James, Gary Donald Jefferson, Robert Allen Johnson, Ronnie Lloyd Johnson, Philip Alfonso Jones, William Lloyd Kennard, Robert Louis Knight Jr., Kenneth Glenn Conniff, Eugene Richard Kritz, Andrew Michael Kubel, Everett Eugene Langston, William Dean Laraway, Charles Lattimore Jr., Martin Lechuga, Edwin Harry Levering, Stephen Mix Lewis, Hans Georg Rudolf Lorenz, Richard Joseph Manley, Michael Ernest Mata, Emmett Mays Jr., Douglas Wayne McCarty, James Richard McClellan, Leo McEachern, John William McFarland, Bruce Francis McMillan, Charles Henry Meeks Jr., John Michael Mellom, Wilfredo Mercado Santos, Michael Joseph Miguel, Dale Laverne Milbrandt, John Michael Miller, Puis Leo Miller, Lawrence Stephen Mills, Kenneth Edward Mims, George Washington Moore, Oliver Wendell Myers, Jan Houston Nelson, Patrick Michael Neville, Jerry Russell Nichols,
John Arley Nixon, Richard Noyola, Charles Doyle Oglesby, Frederick Richard Oler, Jack William Osborne, John Albert Ocellis, William Lee Owen Jr., Joseph Flavio Paez, Charles Hughes Penn, Edward Percy Pilkington, James Dennis Piper, William Hart Pitzenbarger, Clifton Dennis Potts, Peter Earl Powell, Randall Boyd Prinz, John J. Rabideau, Bradford Gregg Racy, Charles Ray, Peter Edward Reese, Edward William Riley, Ronald Edgar Reed, Edward Charles Reitchie, Claude Roberts, James William Robinson Jr., Ronald Arthur Burt Roth, Medard A. J. Ruley, Guillermo A. Ruiz Bernard, Danny Gilbert Rubel, Jack Allen Sanders Jr., Jeffrey Truitt Sapp, Donald Sherwood Sawyer, Robert L. Scheidel Jr., Joseph A. Schoolmeesters, Ronald J. Seesholtz, Henry Arnold Shiver, J. C. Leslie Short, Rosendo Flores Silvas, Carrie Hubert Seiler, Joe Reyes Silva, Robert Hall Smart, Joseph Frank Smith, Matthew Edward Smith, Bruce Michael Sowers, Thomas Donald Steele, George Charles Steinberg, Peter Louis Stith, William Edward Swanson, Clifford Lawrence Tarbell, Kenneth David Thompson, Charles Clare Thompson, Stanley Scott Tillotson, David Marlowe Tomlinson, Larry Thomas Turner, Patrick Frank Van Duynhoven, Douglas Allen Varner, Gonzalo H. Villasenor, Robert Leroy Wade, Daniel Edgar Walden, George Howard Ward, Gary Wallace Ward, Richard Michael Warren, John William Watkins, Alfred Webb, Jr., Frederick H. Whitmore, Eric Williams, Willis White Williams, Daniel Eugene Williams, Arthur C. Williams, Jr., Irving McKinley Wilson, Jr., James C. Wood, Charlie K. Wooden, Lawrence Edward Zapolsky, Daniel Gregory Zagarak,